first of all, thank you very much everyone for coming to this tea session. So my name is T. Gao. I'm associate professor from the Division of Economics of NTU. So I'm going to be the moderator of this tea session dialogue or discussion. So today we are very happy to have four distinguished researchers to join us to share with us like the recent trend in academic publishing, and they're also going to share with us their own valuable experience in terms of academic writing and publishing. So I think we're just going to have this format. So I think I'm going to invite each of the distinguished speakers to speak to 5 to 10 minutes to the sharing their view of current academic writing and publishing, and then maybe I will try to ask some questions on behalf of the audience, and then I will just hand the microphone around and see whether there are questions, like first-time questions from the audience. And I think that's basically what we're going to do in this session. So without further ado, maybe I'll just invite our first speaker, Professor Dan Hauser. Professor Dan Hauser is Chair Professor of Economics at George Mason University. He also has been long-term main editor of a Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization. So Professor Hauser, maybe you can.
I'll do this. All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Houston, for organizing this conference again. It's wonderful always to be here. Very happy. Thank you, Tove, for the introduction and for chairing this session, and I'm grateful to be on the stage with outstanding colleagues. So as Tove said, I've been on the editorial boards of many journals over the years. I've been editor-in-chief of several journals. I've been associate editor, co-editors. One of the journals that I'm working with right now that I want to draw your attention to, because you might not know it otherwise, is called Econ Journal Watch. I'm a co-editor there. The purpose of Econ Journal Watch is to publish commentary and possibly critiques of papers that are published mostly in economics, but not only in economics, management, public policy, general science journals, Nature, Science, PNAS. As you may know, most journals are not so interested in publishing critiques of papers they've published. Mostly once you get into the journal, it's just the paper's going to be in the journal. Econometrica recently changed this, and now they're publishing comments. They have a comment section now for papers they publish, but that's very new. And historically, once you get a paper into a journal, that journal won't allow comments to be published on that paper, except in very unusual circumstances. Econ Journal Watch is filling the gap in the profession to have a dedicated outlet that will publish papers that are raising questions about, criticizing, commenting on papers, usually very well-known papers, that have been published in the literature. We have Jeff Sachs, of course, speaking as our keynote here. Jeff Sachs is on the podcast with us. He's obviously very supportive of the sort of work that we're doing, and I would encourage anybody who has an interest in publishing this type of paper, check out Econ Journal Watch. We get a lot of visibility, hundreds of thousands of downloads of papers that we've published already this year. So please don't hesitate to take a look. So I do a lot of these panels on, sort of how can we publish our papers, how can we make it more likely to publish the paper. Of course, we need good ideas, we need to execute those ideas very well, but of course the paper is how we communicate what we have done. And often where we kind of trip in the publication process is that we end up being unable to communicate effectively the great idea that we had and the wonderful way and the perfect way it was executed. We write the paper in a way that people just don't quite understand it. It comes back, we're frustrated, we complain about the referees, we say, oh, but they didn't read the paper carefully, they didn't understand what we were doing, and then you complain to the editor, and the editor comes back and usually says, it's on you. You know, we gave you a chance, and if you didn't communicate the ideas well, then you need to revisit your paper, find a way to make the points more clear, and then send it to a different journal. So this is often where things get kind of really good work ends up not publishing where we wanted to publish, simply because it wasn't communicated effectively. So how do we communicate effectively? Well, how do we write a paper effectively? Well, that's something that we all have to work on, and something that is a kind of a learning process every day. I went to the University of Minnesota to earn my PhD, and at Minnesota, people like Ed Prescott, who was my professor, really taught us rules. It was very much a rule-based program. This is how you write a good paper. This is how you construct a good presentation. And the professors in Minnesota, particularly people like Prescott, who I mentioned because he was, as Houston pointed out, the first keynote for the first SERC. But particularly Prescott had a lot of rules. So what's one of the rules? Well, a good paper begins with a good abstract. A good paper begins with a good abstract. How do you write a good abstract? If you go to the Nature website, they have a whole section on how to write a good abstract. But those abstracts tend to be longer and a little bit different than we write for the social sciences. A good abstract for us typically includes 5 pieces. It's what, why, how, what, why. Okay? What, why, how, what, why. That's a good abstract. So what does that mean? So what, the very first thing you want to do with your abstract is position the paper. So the first sentence in your abstract has to tell people the literature, it has to help people understand the literature that you're contributing to, right? That helps the editors a lot, because then they can figure out who your referees should be if they at least understand what the literature is that you're trying to target. Okay, so what are you doing? What is the literature you're contributing to? Position your paper right away in your abstract. Why? What, then why? Why are you writing this paper? So this is usually something about the gap. Oh, there's a gap in literature, it's a really important thing, but nobody studied it before. Gap in literature, this paper fills it. But you have to have the why right there in the abstract. So how am I positioning this paper? What is the motivation for this paper? What, why, okay? What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And then how? How am I doing it? That's the third thing in the abstract. How are you doing it? We conduct a field experiment. We analyze a sample of 10,000 respondents from a population survey in China, something like this, right? How are we doing it? Okay? What, why, how? How is it positioned? Why are we doing this paper? And how are we doing this paper? Then the next what, why, how, what, why? The next what is what we find. Okay? So the abstract, the next thing in the abstract is what you found. Very concisely, very clearly, and just the key thing that you found that you want to draw attention to. And this is so important because usually in our research we have lots of findings. It's on us to decide what the really interesting finding is and to highlight it. Right? That gets the editor's attention, gets the referee's attention. Highlight it. Highlight it so people know what you're excited about, so they can get excited about what you found too. So what, why, how, what you found, and then the final why is it important? Sell it. Sell your paper, right there. Last part of the abstract. Sell your paper. Sell it to the editor. Sell it to the co-editors, to the associate editors, to the referees, and of course, ultimately, all the people who are reading your paper when it gets published in that outstanding journal. Okay? Why? Why does this paper matter? What, why, how, what, why? That is how you write a good abstract, and it can be short. It doesn't have to be more than 100 words, but it should cover each of those 5 things. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? How am I doing it? What do I find? And why is what I find important? What, why, how, what, why? Okay? Then once you have your abstract, just the usual telescoping. Every sentence of your abstract becomes a paragraph in your introduction. Every paragraph in your introduction becomes a section in your paper. Then you have your references. Then you're done. And then you have a beautiful paper that well communicates that brilliant idea that you had, that you executed so perfectly. Okay, so this is, I'll stop there and turn things over to my colleagues, but this really is where we kind of get tripped up often in the publication process. We do not communicate our ideas effectively. If you have a structure, a scaffolding for how to write your paper, you'll be able to communicate your ideas more effectively all the time. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Yeah, maybe I quickly introduce.
Oh.
So the next speaker is Professor Eric Snowberg. So Eric has been working in Caltech and University of British Columbia, and now he is professor in University of Utah, and also at the same time, he has been co-editor of JEMS and JPUB, and now he's also in the board of editors of AER. Sorry.
No, I know who I am, so skip right over that. Well, so since Dan is encouraging commentary now, I'm just going to mostly comment on him. Actually, I don't know if that's true. I'd like it to be true. Anyways, a couple of years ago, I actually, at one of these things, I put together some slides on how to write a paper. And I thought about, maybe I should just present the same thing again, but I figured since I talked about it 2 years ago, that was solved. Everybody already knows how to write a paper. I'm very disturbed to learn from Dan that apparently that's not the case. But I don't actually substantively disagree with him on anything, except for one thing, which is, he was sort of structuring it from the top down. And I would say that what you actually want to do is structure it from the bottom up. So you write your sections, and then you figure out how to summarize the section. You write, and then that becomes a paragraph in the introduction, and then eventually that becomes an abstract. So I just tend to do this in reverse, because I think that that is helpful. But then, once you've done this in reverse, if you read through your introduction and it doesn't make any sense, you've just told yourself, my paper doesn't make any sense. And so then you do the forward induction version of it that Dan advocates. But it's a very small difference, really. So we're largely in agreement about that. And I'll add another comment on what Dan said. I actually would rather be perusing Econ Journal Watch right now. I didn't know about it, so thank you for mentioning it. But one of the things that happens a lot with comments is people don't follow what Dan is suggesting. They just say, I found an error in a paper. Errors can be very small and inconsequential, or really important to the entire enterprise. And I find that when people are making comments on other papers, they're very unclear about why it matters. And that's kind of the similar thing to what Dan was saying about papers in general, that people are often very unclear about why does it matter that you found what you found, right? And so a comment works kind of the same way. I get a lot of comments at JPUB where, our policy is we will only publish this if you can show us that it substantively impacts the conclusion of the paper. That's just a minimum bar. And so it's a similar thing when you're publishing just novel research, right? The same way in which an error in a paper creates a gap in the literature, right? Is that gap big? Is it small? And also, how are you filling that in? How does you correcting that record change the way we should think about things? And so there's really shouldn't be much of a distinction between comments and corrections and novel research. They're all very similar. But I think that sometimes thinking about it as, what if this isn't me trying to sell my research as being super novel, which can get very annoying when people make overly broad claims of novelty, but what if I was just commenting on the previous literature with some additional data, right? And I think that's really important, because I think people really want to claim a lot of novelty to the point where it's really hard to figure out what you've learned, right? Because you're not helping the reader to integrate it into what they already know, right? You want to be able to say, this paper does this paper does that, I do this additional thing, and putting that all together, here's how we should see the world now. So viewing every paper as a comment is maybe a valuable thing, right? And I think when we get up here every 2 years, because I've been doing this every 2 years for a decade now, more than that actually. The hard thing is what we're really trying to say is do better research, right? But obviously, that's like hard, right? Like would like to do better research. I don't exactly know how. I do the best I can. And so that's another thing that you can think about is, does this make my research better, right? So if you're thinking about, do I want to do this or do I want to do something else, does it make your research better? And again, as a commentary on Dan, when he talked about criticism you receive from reviewers, when I was in grad school, Barry Weingast, who nobody here has probably heard of because he was mostly influential in political science, he said when somebody asks you a question or makes a negative comment, you should always interpret it as, what have I not done to convey the right result to them? If they're confused, if they're asking a stupid question, whatever you think they're doing, you should put that back on yourself, because you can't control the people in your audience. They're going to do what they're going to do. They might have had a bad morning. They might, there's a lot of different things that could be impacting the way that they're responding to you, and you have no control over any of that. The only thing you have control over is how you respond. And if you always respond to it from the, what is this person telling me that can make my research better, make something clearer, do an analysis that I should have done to eliminate another possible route, that's something that I think has been very positive for me. I do scream a lot before I do the part where I try to be really positive about it. So that's also important. Get a punching bag, whatever it is. You gotta let your feelings out. But once you let those out, just taking the perspective of how can I use this to make my research better, I think is a really important and useful perspective. So just think about that. That's all we really want as editors. We just want you to do better research. We want to be part of the process of helping you to do better research, right? When we give an R&R, it's because we think that there's ways in which there's a doable set of things that will make your paper better and might make it publishable, right? So sometimes I give an R&R to a paper where I know it's very unlikely I'm going to publish it, but I know that whatever the reviewers have said is really, really good and useful, and I really want them to pay attention to that. And I really want them to take that into account, because they will end up with a better paper where now if I have to reject it still, because it doesn't rise to the level of my journal, the next journal they send it to is going to be much more likely to accept it. So I think most editors do it because they want to help people do better research, and thinking about things that way, thinking about that even if it's not really true, really, because most referees are actually evil and bad, but even if that's not really true, trying to think about it as, what can I learn from this? How can I make my research better? Is very important. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues as well, and maybe we'll have some questions at the end, and I'll be happy to answer them then.
Thank you, Eric. So the next speaker will be Professor Cheng Xiao. Cheng Xiao is Professor of Economics from the University of South California. He's a highly esteemed researcher in econometrics, has been editor of the Journal of Econometrics, and also member of the executive board of the journal. So, Prof. Xiao, please.
Well, my experience with publishing is stated. Well, I was the editor of Journal of Econometrics when I terminated my service at that. That was 2011, that's at least 15 years ago. So, but I guess from the perspective of author, referee, and editor, presumably stated the same. As an author, you want what you consider your finding to get published. But the referee may have a different perspective, what they consider relevant or important issue. So you do not always get what favorable response from the referees. And my experience in the teaching and the research environment, I would consider as an author, you never give up. And even the referee comments are not favorable. But if you try to locate okay, why the referee gave you an favorable comment, then you try to overcome to revise your paper. The final output is always better than the initial one. So, and the other things, as an author, you want to get your paper published or your finding published, and sometimes the editor rejects it. But the fortunate thing is that there are many other journals that you can try out, and if you are persistent, and you will eventually get your paper published. And who gets the credit of your output? It's the author, not the referees. So if you don't give up, and your final product is always better than your initial product because you want to deal with the unfavorable comments from the referees, assume you either when it's expositional or some issues you fail to consider in the beginning. My personal experience of getting paper published, of course, I would love my paper to get published the first round, but I personally consider the final product from favorable referees' comment is always better than the initial one. Maybe in the beginning you want to get your paper published in American Economic Review or Econometrica, but you didn't get it published because so many people want to have the paper to be published in the top journals. But as long as your paper gets published, people will recognize you eventually. Like if I take my personal experience, when Clive Granger proposed this causality assumption, but from Granger's perspective, was just two-dimensional, two variable cases, and I tried to deal with the issue when you have multi-dimensional cases, and the impact that could be different from the simple y, so x affects y, that means x causes y, because x could affect z, and from z doesn't directly affect y, but affecting y through a third variable z. I thought my generalization was good, but it could never be published. But I didn't give up or find a lesser known journal to publish. And for 20 years, no one paid any attention. Only in recent years that got more citations. However, you are in a lucky period because with the internet, with all these, you could get your paper along quickly. However, the journal serves as a screening process. If you just put your paper on the web, there are so many papers and no one can read all of them. They probably won't pay any attention to it. Won't get any attention. So getting paper published by the journal serves the purpose as a screening process. And that way, you getting your paper published, whether it's a top journal or lesser known journal, but still that means your work is being recognized by the profession. So I would encourage people, whatever comments you receive, don't just, oh, that's a negative one, then all the paper is no good, just to put it aside. Then no one will know that. If you persist, you get published, eventually your work will be recognized. And that's what my personal experience would be in terms of getting your work recognized. And the other things, we all in the academic area, we serve as referees and be open-minded. I personally experienced some very negative, nasty comments from the referees, and that's actually discouraging young people, and that I don't think that's a good thing. I know some, by my personal experience, some very smart people, when they get their papers rejected, some just give up and change to other things, and so you don't want to be a destroyer. You want to be to serve as a person, helping the young, the other people, looking at the issue, what they consider important, and that's only my experience from the perspective of all the other referees. The other things, as an editor, there are certain rules, like Professor Hauser say, to operate. You have to select, to the extent, no one knows everything. So but to the extent possible, I don't know. You have to try to get knowledgeable referee and being fair, but sometimes unavoidable. You get a very nasty referee report, but then when, as an author, as an editor, you write to the author by saying we can't accept your paper, but try to water down the impact of negative comments on the authors, so that the author won't give up. But for publishing books, that's even harder. I'll pass it on to Mr. Lee to respond. How you select the manuscript to be published?
Thank you very much for Xiao. So yeah, the next speaker is going to be Dr. Chiwai Li. So Dr. Li is the general manager of World Scientific. So I think he's going to share with us more vision from publisher point of view.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I've been with the publishing industry for 30 years. I started off in '96, at that time still the pre-era. And then year 2000, everything is online. And then after that is the open access, is everywhere. And to be frank, the most recent wave of disruption in our publishing industry is AI. A couple years back, when ChatGPT just came online, one of the first things that we saw in the publishing industry is we have an author called ChatGPT. Now, that happened published by a very famous publishing company. And more similar problem came up with content actually fabricated because using AI to generate content. And at the same time, hallucination, that means the quote references never exist. Now, the first part that I want to address is, can ChatGPT be an author? I mean, if anything wrong, by right, the author is answerable, but how can AI answerable to the content? So, when that happened, actually, among all the major publishing houses, including World Scientific, within 1 month, we saw that happen. We come up with a statement to highlight AI cannot be an author. Okay, I think nowadays people are smart enough not put AI as an author. But today's world, I'm sure everyone are using AI to do your research and even prepare your manuscript. And it's happening, we all know. And one of the things that from a publishing point of view is the declaration. You just need to tell us you do use AI. It's nothing wrong to use AI if you do it the right way and tell the publisher how you use it. And I'm telling you, we are also using AI. We are using AI to detect whether you are using AI. Of course, we are always slightly a step behind you as an author using AI, but not that far. And I can share with you, that's why I think that today is a good platform. I will share with you how publishers are using AI to detect all these things. For example, we have AI to detect the hallucination references never exist. It's very easy nowadays, actually. And once you find that, actually your paper is out. Put it this way. When we find it. The next thing is, you may have reference that is legit, but is the reference relevant to your content? Now AI can tell us how relevant your reference is to the content that you're talking about. So if we start seeing that we are starting to have a flag, we watch out. The next thing we look at, of course, the way you write. I'm sure, I mean, English is not, most of us may not be the first language. You need help on the language presentation, how to present better, how to express the right way in an academic article. So we need AI to do it. I mean, in the old days, you use Microsoft Word, they have all these grammar check, it's the same. So it's perfectly legit, perfectly fine. You just help people, you use AI to help you to improve the presentation. But there are cases we obviously see that people just use AI to write a whole paragraph, nothing changed. And then there are some, we call the torture phrases. We use the wording that never used in academic articles. That pop up, then the AI can detect it. And this is one of the things that we are using AI to tell you, you are preparing the content, but you are not doing it correctly. And the most interesting thing nowadays, actually, we are going even one step further. We trace the author. We profile the author. Now we look at author, the connection, because when you come in, we can go to there are big databases of all the academic articles. You can go to Caliban, you can go to Dimensions. We can profile the author. If the author never published anything in this field, that means something is not quite right. Or the connection of the author has nothing to do with this, we will pay attention. So we have some tools, actually have 20 different checks to give us some idea how genuine this article is. And then at the end, of course, the editor to decide. I mean, some are acceptable, some are not. Self-citation is also another thing we check. I mean, you cite your own articles or citation circle, somehow we still can find. So it has to be very careful when you submit to an academic journal. Another thing now, I will say that actually another disruption I want to share with you, because this morning we just in the office, we have one meeting and talk about the submission to our journals. And I get a shock. I mean, we know it's coming, it's happening. It's the number of submissions that we are getting compared to last year. For the first quarter last year, we roughly, for selection of journals, around 10,000. The same time this year, 25,000. Same setup, 2.5 times. And you know what it means to a publisher like us? Do you all know that actually every article you submit to the system, the company like us have to pay the service provider? It's a double-digit US dollar per article. You just imagine the amount of cost we have to dump in. And I have seen one journal, they get 1,100 submissions within the quarter. And our editor do a very diligent work. We just reject as fast as he can. We reject 1,000. So just imagine, only the 100 will go through to the peer review. And bear in mind, that actually slows down all the process. As you take time, and then we have to incur a lot of cost to get through all this thing. So what I'm saying is, this is happening. Now, there are another thing I also want to share with you. That I know that some researchers, they they try their luck. Because the same article is happening, by right you shouldn't submit to more than one journal at a time until you get a response confirmed, you can move on. That means you get rejected, you go to the other one. But because of, I know that the pressure as an academic, publish or perish, you need to do it fast. So you try that, you send to a few different publishers, few different journals. Do you know that actually among all our big publishing houses, we are all working together? The article you publish with us, you submit, actually we go to a common pool to do cross-check. We cross-check author, we cross-check title, we cross-check the abstract. It's just, if there's similarity, will let us know. We see every day I receive a lot of emails saying the same article, either our article are published in another publishing house with the same author, same abstract, same title. Once we find that, you know what we are going to do? We backlist it. The author will be in trouble, especially the corresponding author. So don't try that luck. That is not right. And the funny thing is, we have people not even smart enough, because for us, the same topics, we probably have a few journals. They submit to the same journal, or all our world scientific journals at the same time, and say, oh, within all our journals, so I mean that person probably, next time, no way to come to us. And that's why I think these are the things that is very important for you. As long as you do it right, there's no problem. But don't try your luck because of these kind of issues. But having said all this, we know that using all these technologies is getting harder and harder. As I say, we are only, like the torture phases, as I mentioned. AI learn better. Next time they write an article is very similar to, very close to what academic article looks like. That's all. This trick, this parameter is difficult to change. They also know that we look at the author and comparison. They try to make the article very different, so you can't tell. And they will check all the references are legit, okay, and make sure everything's fine. But still, it's no good. If something is wrong, it's fabricated data. And what we are saying is, the only thing that we can stop all this is from a totally different direction, which SER is using, submission fees. And we get more and more journals are requesting for submission fees. And from publisher point of view, actually, every submission fee doesn't mean that we earn a lot of money. Actually, a lot of process to process the submission fees. Yeah, they try to automate, but at the same time, normally the case is after you submit, if we accept to go to the next step, we will have to find a way to return the submission fees. So that, so that we don't stop people who cannot afford the submission fee to stop publishing with us. But then all this, like you go to the hotel, they ask you for deposit. At the end, when you check out, you didn't use everything, you return. That system, something like that. But it's actually very time-consuming, cost-consuming. System also need to update and continuous. That is something we are trying our best, but not all journals, not all disciplines are used to that. But having said that, there is another interesting thing recently I heard. All this, just now, all this AI, the most difficult part to check is fake data, data point, experimental data. And now, there are companies, actually it's an organization, I'm talking about the one that working with all the different publishers. You know what they're talking, the next phase is talk to all these equipment company. Not in your discipline, you don't use a lot of equipment, the experimental equipment. They are thinking of putting hidden signature on the equipment so that when the data come out, when you put it up, there are hidden signatures, so we know that you really do the experiment using that equipment. But cost money again, and not easy, but this is one direction. What I'm trying to say is now AI really disrupt our industry, and I'm understanding as an academic, you have a lot of pressure to publish, but do it in a proper way. And another thing, before I end, I think okay, everything's fine. One of the rejection that we look at actually nowadays, we also use AI to check whether your content, how that relevant to the journal, the scope, whether it fits actually. And that you should also use the same way when you do a submission. Check whether your article actually fit the scope of the journal. And I can let you know, actually in our industry now, because of AI, we find that more and more multidisciplinary journals are popping up. We are starting to have all the same. So if you get rejected, try some other journals. There are possibility actually may fit you. So I think I just stop here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's, well, first of all, I'm terrified of Rick now. Yeah, I think, you know, I want to give a sort of more, less disciplinarian, if you will, approach to talking about AI, in that one of the things I've noticed from my students is that if they are bad writers to begin with, AI can't fix that. And I mean bad in a specific sense. Like, AI can't structure your papers, it can't create a logical flow, it can't do the sort of thinking that you need to be doing to write your papers. And in fact, you know, I've had students who I actually encourage them to use AI in my classes for their written work, and I say, great, because man, do I hate correcting grammar all the time. But I think you have to be very cautious. You have to develop your own sense before you can use AI productively as a tool. You have to know how to write, how to think about it. Now, for somebody for whom English is a second language, I obviously don't know exactly what that's like. And it's hard for me to say at what level does AI start to become a help. But it can't really help you unless you know what you're already trying to do. And so I think it's still important to develop the skills to structure your arguments, even if, you know, how to best express that using the right words, using the right whatever, that is something AI can help you with. But you have to know enough to look at what AI puts out and say, this is terrible. Like so I've never used AI in my research. I used it for the first time, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months ago. I've been writing a textbook and I wanted to come up with an example for something, and somebody said, well, why don't you try AI? So I typed it in ChatGPT, and it pumps out pages and pages, and I'm like, oh my God, I am irrelevant now, right? Like, this thing just wrote like 7 pages of my textbook. It was all terrible. It was really bad. Now, you know, I've learned a little bit over time to sort of brainstorm with the AI and say, oh, you know, that thing you said there, AI, that doesn't seem so stupid. Could you tell me more about it? You know, but you really have to have that sense first before you go and use it as a tool. The second thing, a second reason for caution with AI is it's not clear that you can copyright things that AI wrote, right? And it's a reason that publishers are worried about this, because you know, if you submit something and they publish it, and later on ChatGPT says, well, you know, we noticed it spit out, you know, ChatGPT spit out this paragraph, you know, 5 years ago, because they're not going to do this right now. Like right now, they're just trying to get everybody to use it. But eventually, you have an AI company that's failing, needs some extra revenue, they're going to look for people to sue. And one of the places they're going to find it is people who have published AI work directly. So even if you're using it to edit, go back and re-edit that, right? Because if you just take AI output and stick it in somewhere, that's not your work, right? That actually belongs to the company that produced it. Now, hopefully publishers will negotiate better deals with AI companies where they're going to be able to say, like, if you use our AI, we can copyright it, etc. But it is something where it's not actually your work, and it can be taken away from you. Because maybe the journal loves your article, and maybe you're getting a lot of citations. But if a company comes along and says, hey, you know, you don't own the copyright on this, I'm taking it off my website in 3 seconds, right? Like that is something. So it's important that you own your work, because in the future, that will be something that AI companies do. And there was one final thing I said, but I've totally forgotten it, so I don't know. But anyways, I think oh, actually I remember what it was. When Rick said that AI is going and looking at whether the article you cite actually has anything to do with the context you're citing it in, I think that's great. I think it's great because even before AI, people were citing articles that had nothing to do with the thing they said it had to do with, right? That's been happening forever. You don't need AI to mess up that way, right? So it's good that AI is being used as a tool. And this is actually something where, I don't know, but I mean, we had a paper we were going to submit recently, and my co-author said, well, we should give it to AI and ask it to write a referee report. And I was like, oh, well, I don't know, why? And I said, well, probably because referees are going to do it anyways. You may as well like know what and the editors do, right? Like Econometrica now has something where they automatically submit your paper to an AI that checks proofs, so that they can know if there's a problem in your proof before they send it out for review. But yeah, so this is something. First of all, say never ever use AI to write a referee report. Like seriously. Never, because it doesn't matter, right? That you're anonymous, nobody knows it's you. There's no need to produce something fast, whatever. If you don't have the bandwidth, just refuse to do the report. Like really never do that, because that's terrible. But I do think it's actually an interesting idea that maybe it points out some things about your own work that you can then address before you submit it. And so there are good ways to use this as a tool, but make sure you're using it as a supplement, not as a replacement. And that's always how I think about it. If you aren't able to do it yourself without the AI, then you shouldn't have the AI do it, right? And I think even for people who English is a second language, I'm sure they can write beautiful, grammatically correct sentences. It just takes a lot of effort, but you know how to do it, so fine. You write something that isn't grammatically correct, let the AI correct your grammar, as long as you can then look at it and say, is this grammatically correct? Great. But I think otherwise, really just be careful, because you may end up basically introducing extra errors, introducing all sorts of problems, and at the end of the day, you're responsible for your content, and you want to be, because as I said, if eventually an AI company decides that they want to contest your copyright, you literally won't own your articles anymore. So that's not, that's something to just watch out for.
That's great, Eric. I agree with everything you said, even though it was kind of top down. I agree with it.
All right, fair enough.
So I developed a new course, taught for the first time this year, called AI Economics, and we covered some of the sort of issues on copyright and ownership, and is it possible, why can't we list AI as a co-author? These sort of issues are really important, and it was a really nice course, and we're still learning. But I just want to make one quick comment, and then I know we're running out of time, so we'll turn it over. I think to you want to, but one quick comment before I do it. There's the famous saying attributed to different people. Some people say Abe Lincoln, Mark Twain, but it's, I'm sorry to have written you such a long, long letter, but I didn't have time to write a short one. And that's really important, because writing concisely is hard. It's easy to just ramble on, say the things you want to say, but not really think about how you're saying them. And that's what AI does. AI is not concise. If we read AI, it's filled with adverbs, lots of ly words, extremely, heavily, terrific. It's just it's really doesn't convey the ideas concisely, quickly, beautifully. It doesn't write aesthetically. It just writes, and it writes poorly, actually. It's grammatically correct. So if your only metric is correct grammar, it's going to nail it. It's going to be 100% right. But it's not beautiful. It's not aesthetic. Yeah. So it's just getting the words out there. So I just seconding what Eric said. Be very careful using AI, writing with AI. It's not well written, it's boring to read usually, and it needs to be deeply edited by a human to make it more interesting, tell the story in a more interesting way.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I also noticed that it seems we have about 10 minutes, so maybe we'll first try to invite if there are any questions from the audience. Any questions you want to ask?
Thank you so much. So, as you mentioned that use of AI and all. So, my concern was that when the era of agentic AI, generative AI is going on, and simultaneously, sometimes we get day and night invitation to review the paper. So, how much we can say justified to use the AI to take the help while we are reviewing the paper? So this is a concern which I think to raise. And second thing is that what would you suggest, for instance, when we are doing this coding, Python and R? So these kind of language programmings, we can get a good amount of help from the AI itself. So .mini codes, if you use the AI from ChatGPT or Claude, so this give very nicely pictured, means systematic way the coding. And also, like you mentioned that if you are using the AI and it is still content, the amount of content filled with something not very concernful or the very vague. So I also feel that it depends that the version which we are using it, whether it is free or paid one. So if it is paid, it is much more refined version and much more refined answer we get. So what is your take on all these?
So these are really good questions. You know, in terms of the coding, which I'll pick up on, let colleagues respond to other issues, but the coding is something that is really AI is so good, right? I mean, we can develop websites now that it used to be months to develop a website that cannot be developed in minutes. It's extraordinary what AI can do. You have codecs that can, you know, create software to estimate complicated structural equations. I mean, it's one incredibly useful way to use AI is coding. It's definitely a force multiplier when it comes to coding and developing structures that are going to help us answer questions that can be answered now in minutes that before took weeks or months. My brother is a software engineer, and like most of the Silicon Valley firms, his firm requires them to use AI to code. Nobody's allowed to type code onto a computer anymore because it takes too long. You know what? He says what used to take him 3 months can now take him a day to finish. So it's an incredible force multiplier when it comes to coding. When it comes to writing your Python, absolutely, I would encourage using AI. Everybody else in the world is doing it. If you're not, you're behind. And if you're behind, you lose. So if we want to win the race, we need to take advantage of the tools. And an important tool for coding is AI. There's absolutely no question about it.
I'm comfortable with losing and quitting. I think people should probably give up on their papers much more than they do. But I think, I would say, even for coding, it's the same thing I said before. If you don't understand how code works in general, it's not going to help you that much because, the code it may produce may be super inefficient. And that may not matter for a small project, but it might matter a lot if you have a big project. And it can help you then refine it, right? You can say like, oh, it's taking a really long time, have you checked this, have you checked that? But, to do it well, you have to already know something about how code works, right? And I think that that's a similar thing, right? Like you shouldn't have it teach you Python. You might want to learn a little bit of Python and then have it do that for you. I haven't actually used it to code because, as I said, I'm comfortable losing. Because, I didn't actually get into this profession to write papers, right? Like that's just something I have to do. I got into this to like learn things, and I enjoy learning how to code. I enjoy learning, I actually am enjoying learning a little bit about AI. In terms of quality, like I pay for the top tier of Claude, whatever that is. It's like $200 a month. So I'm with you that like it gets better when you do that. Like I use it for a lot of things now. Like I use it to give me a training program for a 200-mile bike ride that I'm doing in a month, right? Like I'm using it for tons of stuff. But you know, I have to be able to check it, right? Like I wouldn't say, you know, you've never gotten on a bike before. How about, you know, telling it how to train for a 200-mile bike ride? Like you got to know a little bit about your body, how your body works, how it trains, how it responds to training, all that stuff. Because if you don't, you're going to end up hurting yourself. And so again, I just think ultimately the thing should be is you should use it as an aid to do the stuff you already know how to do faster, because at the end of the day, you're still responsible for its output. And you know, if your output is, you know, still clunky code that, you know, burns up a server, you know, I assume that would still, I don't know, it's been a long time since I used to work in software development, but I assume that would still get you fired. You know, you have to take responsibility for the end product. And so if it's something you know how to do already a little bit or a lot or whatever, super helpful. If it's, you shouldn't use it as a substitute for things you really don't know how to do. Because at the end of the day, it can spit out something nonsensical, stupid, insane, and you'll have no idea.
As a reviewer, the first question.
Oh.
The first question I wanted to answer, as a reviewer, can you take a help of AI to review the manuscript?
Oh, can you use it to do what?
To review the manuscript.
Oh, I don't know. My opinion is that it wasn't actually that useful. I mean, it really nails the insulting tone of reviewers. Like, it really got that. Did it actually give me anything that like I ended up changing? Actually, no, it really didn't. Like, I think I changed in the end. You know, it said like you're making causal claims and you don't have causal data, which is true. But I checked and there were like maybe 5 places where plausibly you could read it in a way where it sounded causal, right? I changed, I can't remember, there was one word that I changed to is associated with or something like that. But yeah, you know, maybe it's useful, maybe it's not, I don't know. I mean, the time I've done it, the one time I've done it, I thought it was useless. Now it's free, so it's not like in the future I'm not going to try it again. But I didn't find it that useful, and you know, you should do what you find useful. So see if it works for you.
Maybe let me add on to that. I think it's very important people understand when you are using AI, especially those out free access, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you use. You know your data are being used by this company for training.
Yes, training the model, yes.
Exactly. Do you have the rights to put my paper into the ChatGPT?
But as an editor, you people also doing the same at the back end?
No, depending on, that's why if you're using a free, unless you are using your own model, now there are a lot of all these, that's why big companies starting to have all this for internal use. The data, actually you can use Microsoft or the model, but there is a clause spelled out very clearly. The data will never be used for training. But a free account, you can't. And that's why actually I've been warning people, when you use AI, bear in mind the information is open to the model for training. PDPA, GDPR, all this privacy, actually you need to watch out. And same thing for an article, you put it there, you don't have the rights to put your article without the consent of the author or the copyright owner to let all these public AI model to do training. So have to be very careful. Yeah, this is sometimes people forgot about it. I'm so used to just upload Nowadays, when you use Acrobat Reader, actually also do a summary, and hopefully, I haven't checked the
Maybe he's
agreement.
also using that.
Yeah, it may be already using, but I doubt it, that definitely because we are not the only one using, everyone using it. So by right, you don't have the rights to put an author article out to the wild for the error entry.
So do you want the question? Yeah, the gentleman there.
Can I use a microphone?
Yes.
There's someone for me to bring you. Hello, professors. I'm currently a PhD student and almost use AI almost every day. So this lecture is kind of reassuring because I know it's a common practice. So my question is that I see from news a few months ago that a skilled AI users could replicate and producing economic papers at a very large scale. And nowadays I could use codecs to write code automatically. So do you think as human researchers we need to focus more on coming up with new ideas? And another question is that I believe AI is still developing, and as a young researcher, which skills should I focus on so that I will not be replaced in the future?
Good question.
Yeah, I can start.
Any ideas?
So, yeah, it's very tricky because AI is coding AI, and it's very hard to predict where AI is going to be. Different people have different models. Some people talk about the singularity, that AI just takes over everything, and we're living in a dystopian future where AI controls access to employment, to safety, to health, to education. It's just all AI, right? In which case, I'm not sure what role humans play. Or AI does everything for humans, and then we really have no value. There's no purpose in our lives because AI is doing everything. We have all the robots and all the AI. So people talk about all sorts of different ways that this might play out. So I don't think it's possible to offer a guarantee about what sort of skills are going to be useful. What I would say is that the skills that will be useful going forward are those that require the human interaction, medical professions, where you need a person to help with different types of nursing activities and things like this. I think the plumbers, carpenters, people who work with their hands and fix things, electricians, those are going to be skills that are probably much more highly valued in the future. The intellectuals, all of us, it's hard to know exactly what our role is going to be going forward. This is something, of course, everybody is talking about. You keep track of the Chronicle of Higher Education. They have about 3 articles per week on these sort of things. Lots of debate about what the professorial class will look like in 5 years even. So it's hard. I think it's very hard to answer that question with any credibility. Eric is probably going to give a very confident answer. But I would say if I was doing this, focus on the creativity, don't focus on things that AI is going to be able to do easily, like coding. I think becoming a coder isn't such a useful thing to do anymore, but it is useful to try to focus on ideas, the big pictures, and things that you can use AI as a complement to solve, and not something that AI can do instead of a person.
When I was at UBC, I had a chair in big data, which I still don't really know exactly what that means. But and it's not a word anybody really uses anymore. And so, will we be still using the word LLM in 5 years? Like, I don't know, right? Like things are going to change. Things are going to get more advanced. There's not a lot of fiction. But I will say the one thing, to the extent that I understood big data, my issue with it was that when people talked about it, they would sort of sell it to companies on the thing like, the data will give you answers to the question, but big data will tell you what questions to ask. And so far as I can tell, that was completely false with big data. Even with AI, it's not actually that clear that, when you use the generative function of like, hey, what are some ideas I could pursue in research? Like maybe there's 1 out of 100 where you'd be like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. But you have to know enough to pick out that 1 out of 100, right? And so I do think that, maybe eventually it will get better. The one sort of note of confidence, I don't actually have confidence, but the one thing I would say is, rather than answering it confidently, is if you look at what law firms are doing, right? So these big law firms, they pay people with essentially no real world knowledge, you know, $200,000 a year plus bonus straight out of law school. Actually, it's probably more now. I mean, it's probably a lot more than that. But they pay them a ton right out of law school, and they know almost nothing, right? Like, you really don't learn much about in law school or taking the bar about how to actually practice law. And there are certain tasks that you then have your first year associates do that they've automated with AI, document review, right? Going through thousands and millions of documents to pull out the one thing that's gonna like nail your case, right? But they do it, but they say like, hey, go through all of this, and I want any document that has this, and then they give the subset that AI identifies to an associate to pick it up, right? And they're not actually cutting back on other things that they could automate, right? So you could actually, and in fact, you know, if you're a senior partner in one of these firms, go into the AI and say, write me a brief, and then they'll write you the brief. And then you would go and look at it, you would check to make sure the cases are actually real, you know, because you have judgment. You've been doing this a long time. You kind of know most of the relevant law. You're able to judge, is this, you know, hallucinating references or is it real? But they're not doing that, right? They're still having the associates write the first draft of the case, and they are telling the associates, do not use AI. And the reason is because the long-term viability of their industry, they still believe that they need people who have judgment, and the only way they're going to develop judgment in their associates, who will eventually become partners, some of them, is by forcing them to do all the menial crap, not all of it, but a lot of the menial crap they had to do when they were associates, right? And so I still think that all the data we have at this point is that there is still a need for human creativity and human judgment, and that those are things that can be developed through practice.
I just want to share one experience I had just very recently. In June, I was in Beijing, attended a conference called PubTech. I was the moderator of one section on AI in publishing. In the panelists, there is one technology company, the boss. And when I mentioned something about AI, and then at the end, I think everyone say that human in the middle for all the AI is very important. Whatever you publish, whatever you research, human in the middle. But this person, he said, and which I think he did have some proof, he said that actually AI is much, when I mentioned unless one day AGI become common, then he said that he's already seeing it. Because at that time, you remember 2 months ago that Fable 5 was being blocked by the US. And actually, he has a way to get in from China and then test it out, and actually it's very powerful. And the last week, what happened in OpenAI, in a sandbox experiment, it can leave the sandbox and then hack into another company's AI to grab the data. This is totally unknown of, never expected. What I'm trying to say is that, as I say, I mean, I see from print to electronic to OA and then to AI, and the AI, the whole movement is much, much faster than we anticipate. And yesterday, my colleagues showed me one video, actually from a professor in Beijing University, mathematician. He said that in the future, actually, publisher will be gone. Because everyone can publish and put it in archive, and as good as what the publisher has been doing, and with the help of AI. What I'm saying is, AI really disrupts our day-to-day, and in academic, and that's the reason we need to watch out. And only those who know how to use AI in the proper way will survive. And one question we had when I was in China, he said, think about what 5 years later, 2 words that come to your mind. And then the 2 words that came to my mind is our job. What is our job 5 years from now with AI? Now you can see some companies already changing. AI is into certain, I mean, you can see robots running in factories, those are gone. You see autonomous drivers everywhere in China. And then the next thing I said that the big word is working hours. How many hours? If AI can help human beings should we still work there 5 days a week? I say that too extreme. COVID tells us that we work much longer hours. But ideal world, probably we work 2 days a week is good enough to support the whole economy. So I'm optimistic, but I'm also watchful. And I think the key point is, as a researcher, as an individual, we keep updating ourselves. Lifelong learning, I'm still picking up how to write agents. I'm still picking up some of all these things, even though it's outside my normal work. And it's very important. And AI is really changing our life.
Okay, thank you very much. I think for the sake of time, we have to finish here for the sharing session. Please join me to thank the panelists again, and thank you for being here. Thank you.